Welcome to the Wayland-Yutani Corporation's Employee Handbook, Section 17. So you've allowed a dangerous xenozoological entity aboard our multi-billion-dollar spacecraft. In Alien, Fate of the Nostromo, from designer Scott Rogers and publishing house Ravensberger, you take on the roles of the doomed crew of the interstellar towing vessel, the Nostromo, as they attempt to survive an encounter with the galaxy's deadliest predator. Alien is a co-op game for 1 to 5 players with an easy mode, no Ash the psychopathic android, and a hard mode, Ash the psychopathic android. Each character has 3 to 5 actions allowed to them every turn, and most of them have some special ability that only they have. Players work together to avoid the alien long enough to cobble together useful equipment from scraps and complete the randomly drawn objectives before moving on to the final mission, also randomly assigned from 5 different possibilities. Alien doesn't do anything new to the co-op genre, but it does a good job putting a tense, popular body over the engine. If you are fans of either the IP or the co-op genre, Alien Fate of the Nostromo will likely push some buttons for you in a good way. But if you're more detail-oriented and nitpicky, like me, there are some things that are going to bug you. First off, nobody dies. Normally, I don't like player elimination in games, so I completely understand why Rogers didn't include it in the game. But it's a game based on a movie about a hostile alien predator slowly picking off the crew of a spaceship in deep space one by one. Why does no one die? If I were doing the design, I'd have had the players control the characters as a group rather than picking an individual avatar. So as the crew dwindles, so does the chance of success. The only penalty for running into the xenomorph in Alien Fate of the Nostromo is the loss of morale on the morale track, and the fact that you must flee 3 spaces away. Fleeing isn't even a penalty because often you can use those 3 free moves to get to the place where you actually want to be to fulfill an objective or get close to filling an objective. So, in a way, morale becomes a currency exchanged for enhanced movement. If you run into the alien on your turn, fleeing does immediately end your turn. So it's not all good, but considering that most of the characters in the film die upon their first encounter with the Xeno, getting to run to safety and losing your unused actions seems like a pretty small price to pay. If the lack of character death really bothers you, there are homebrewed mechanics for incorporating the concept into the game. They can be found on BoardGameGeek.com, but I cannot vouch for them making the game any more fun. Second of all, there are some glaring errors in the rules between the text in the book and the actual components. There are also omissions in the rules or components that are just confusing and infuriating. For example, there are some final missions that involve the Nostromo self-destruct system. The self-destruct tracker has 4 tokens on it, and 1 player is in charge of it. When their turn starts, they remove a token from the tracker, and if they can't because all 4 tokens are already gone, the ship explodes and the players lose. It's obvious that that is how you are supposed to deal with the self-destruct mechanism, but that isn't how it's worded on the final mission cards that use the self-destruct. Note the missing word remove from the card on the right here. Also, both cards indicate that the player in charge of the tracker removes a token at the start of their turn, and that implies you remove it and get rid of it. But the defeat condition on the card says if the player starts their turn with 4 tokens, the game is lost. This is just confusing wording as to what you do with the components that handle the timer. Another weird omission or mistake is that you have to combine scrap tokens together to create the different tools and weapons, incinerators, motion trackers, etc. First, the tokens for the items that you can make do not tell you how much scrap it costs to make them. That information is in the rulebook and on the player reference cards, but not on the tokens itself. And there's ample space on the tokens for the scrap icon with a number in it. Secondly, and worse, the cost for one of the items printed in the rules does not match the cost for that item on the player reference cards. Whoops! I am told by internet forums about the game that the cost printed on the reference cards is the correct one, but who can say? Ash, the psychopathic android, is another area of confusion. He comes into play in one of two ways. Either you decide you want to play with the extra challenge, so you play with Ash from the start, or you randomly draw the final mission card that is Ash related.
You have my sympathies.
Either way, both the entry on Ash in the rulebook and the final mission card use the phrase, when Ash moves, but neither actually explain what that means. There are 4 cards in the encounter deck that say, if Ash is in the ship, move him 2 spaces. That's the only place in the entire game that tells you when to move Ash and how much. Those 4 cards. It would be nice if it was mentioned somewhere in the rulebook, especially considering the vast amount of empty space that's on the page devoted to using Ash. Scott Rogers, the designer, is quite active on the Board Game Geek forums for the game and is happy to answer rules questions and make suggestions. And there's one suggestion of his that seems so important that it really should have been included in the actual rulebook. He says that when playing solo, you should play with at least 3 characters. The rulebook does not mention anywhere in it the idea that players would use more than 1 character per player, and yet the designer is convinced that you should play with at least 3 if you're playing by yourself. But what if you're playing with only 2 players? Should they restrict themselves to just 2 characters? Or should they also follow the designer's advice and play with a minimum of 3 characters between them? And if playing with more characters than players is the best way to play, why not just have the instructions say that you always use all 5 crew regardless of the number of players? It isn't as complex as Gale Force 9's Aliens Another Glorious Day in the core, so it will definitely appeal to a different sort of gamer, or the same sort of gamer in a different mood. On the whole, the game is fun and tense and looks good on the table, but I can't shake the feeling that between the thematic inconsistencies and the production errors, it should have spent a little more time incubating before it burst onto the market. I'm Steve Tassi, the Board Game Guy, and this has been my review of Alien: Fate of the Nostromo. I hope you enjoyed the video.